The Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare is now headed to the Senate. The House narrowly passed the American Health Care Act yesterday and then celebrated with President Trump at the White House.
The president then traveled to New York City, where he met with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And during their meeting, Mr. Trump praised Australia's universal health care system. Take a listen to what the president had to say, followed by a reaction from Senator Bernie Sanders during an interview last night on MSNBC.
Well, it could change a little bit, could get maybe even better. It's a very good bill right now. The premiums are going to come down very substantially. The deductibles are going to come down. It's going to be fantastic health care. Right now, Obamacare is failing. We have a failing health care. I shouldn't say this to our great gentleman and my friend from Australia, because you have better health care than we do.
They do have, they have universal health. I know. I thought you would.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute, Chris. All right. The president has just said it. That's great. Let's take a look at the Australian healthcare system. And let's move. Maybe once take a look at the Canadian health system or systems throughout Europe. Thank you, Mr. President. Let us move to a Medicare for all system that does what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to all people at a fraction of the cost per capita that we spend. Thank you, Mr. President. We'll quote you on the floor of the Senate.
Let's bring in James Hohmann. He's a national political correspondent for the Washington Post and author of the Daily 202. So, James, clearly Bernie Sanders amused by that remark from the president. I don't want to try to guess what he was thinking, but what do you make of it? Why do you think he said that?
I think he was trying to be nice to his Australian counterpart. It's very classic. It's sort of an amusing gaffe. One of the criticisms of Trump through this process has been that he really doesn't understand what's in this bill. He famously told all the governors that healthcare was more complicated than he thought. I think he's learning as he goes. It was in that same conversation with the Australian Prime Minister, he criticized the media for fake news, for saying that he had a testy conversation with the Prime Minister when they first talked on the phone in January. And then a minute after that, in the same sit down, he said, maybe we did have a testy conversation. So the whole thing was amusing and funny in that regard.
Yeah, although he may find healthcare complicated, but clearly he's said that he thinks the Israeli-Palestinian situation is one that he can solve. So we'll see how that goes.
Easy peasy. Well,
yes.
Still with healthcare, James, the president took to Twitter this morning, writing that once phase 2 of the healthcare process is complete, we will have, quote, truly great healthcare. So remind people about what phase 2 is. Phase 2 is supposed to encourage competition, which he says, the president says, will then bring down the cost of health care.
Right. So the first part of phase 1 is passing the bill. I think it's really important to understand that what the House did yesterday doesn't change the healthcare system. This still has to go to the Senate, where it sort of starts basically with square one. Republicans there are going to, they say, essentially start from scratch. Assuming it passes Congress, Trump signs it. Then it goes into sort of the regulatory phase, where the Department of Health and Human Services starts figuring out how to implement this bill, and that is when you would start to see the big changes. So for people who are worried and thinking about their health care, we're still a ways off from practical changes, and that second phase is really when you would see them putting the rubber to the road, designing what new marketplaces might look like. And one of the issues with this bill is it was pushed through really fast, so we still unfortunately don't really fully understand what's in it, and I think that will end up getting sorted out by the Senate.
And as we look towards that fight in the Senate, James, what kind of specific challenges is the bill going to face there? I mean, it sounds to me as if they're going to basically start from scratch.
So there's basically 4 camps in the Senate. So Republicans, in order to pass it using the rules, they have to have 50 votes, and they have 52 senators, so they can only afford to lose 2 members. Right now, there's 4 different groups of Republicans that have expressed skepticism. 4 senators are worried about cuts to Medicaid. 3 senators say the only thing they really want to accept is full-scale repeal. They don't want to kind of have a cut around the edges. They just want to get rid of Obamacare root and branch. 1 Republican from Maine doesn't like the House bill because it totally defunds Planned Parenthood, and another has other sort of parochial concerns. So Republicans are going to have to come up with some compromise that wins over all those people. And if you do something to sort of assuage the fears of the senators who are worried about Medicaid cuts, then you're going to upset people like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, who want to get rid of the law altogether. So it's a very difficult needle to thread, and it's why, I think some people were thinking maybe the president was spiking the football before he got to the end zone yesterday.
Right, and Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said that Republicans who voted for the bill will have the vote tattooed on their foreheads. That was her quote. And in fact, Democrats started singing na 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 hey hey goodbye to the Republicans, basically suggesting that come 2018 they're not going to get reelected because of this. So, what sort of impact do you think this will have on the 2018 election?
I think it could be very significant. It's funny, if you think back, we're a quarter of the way between the election and the next election, between last November and next November. But you think back a year and a half ago, who would have thought Donald Trump would be president, that he would have won the Republican nomination and then won the presidency? So anything could happen, but this is definitely a risk. When Republicans were trying to get over the finish line, they only had 4 votes to spare yesterday. They were making the case that it would actually be worse to pass nothing than to pass a flawed bill, that Republicans would look unable to govern, that they would upset conservatives. They ran 4 elections in a row promising to repeal the health care law, that if they didn't pass it yesterday, it wasn't going to happen, and that the consequences would be greater. And there is some argument to be made for that, but I think Republicans have voted for something that gives Democrats a lot of fodder for attack ads. There's a lot in this bill that is not popular, and that will only become less popular when Democrats get the chance to highlight it.
James, I want to shift gears now to the election taking place in France this weekend. You wrote today in the Washington Post that this race is turning into a proxy war between the conflicting worldviews of Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Talk about what you mean, because even though President Obama has endorsed Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump has not officially endorsed anybody.
He's not officially endorsed Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Front, the other candidate in this runoff, but he's made very clear that she's his preference. He said in an interview with the Associated Press that she's stronger on borders and security, and predicted that she'd win. He's tweeted some very supportive statements. His son, Donald Trump Jr., has been much more explicit. Steve Bannon, the chief White House strategist, has spoken very positively and supportively. His former website, Breitbart, very strongly going to bat for the National Front candidate. And Barack Obama, in a pretty unusual, if not unprecedented move, recording a campaign commercial for the closing days of the French election, and basically saying the stakes couldn't be higher. So I think, they are 2 very different worldviews. The president also spoke out last year against Brexit, the UK leaving the European Union. Obviously, Britain decided to go ahead with that anyway. Trump supported Britain leaving the EU. He described himself as Mr. Brexit. So there's obviously very different worldviews. That's not news to any American between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. It's just so interesting to see them weighing in so basically unabashedly on this French election. In the past, you never would have had a president go as far, even short of an endorsement, as Trump has, and you wouldn't have had a former president recording a campaign commercial to run in France. I don't think in previous years that would have even been welcome in France.
Right. And it's interesting, James, because one of the things that I've been seeing in the French press is that it appears that Emmanuel Macron is headed for a win. But could we see, very similarly in France, what we saw here in the United States and in the case of the United Kingdom with Brexit? Are the pollsters and the pundits and the journalists missing this movement, this wave that Marine Le Pen has engendered in France?
So this is obviously the million-dollar question. The polls were right in the first round of the election. They were actually eerily spot on in predicting what would happen. The polls also show that Macron is up more than, or about 20% on average. So, Hillary Clinton was up 3%, 4%. This is 20%. That said, there are some similarities. The problem is that a lot of liberals who voted for other candidates, Macron is sort of running as, he says, a radical centrist. Liberals aren't excited about him. He's a former investment banker. And so her people are very enthusiastic, very likely to vote. There's not as much enthusiasm. And part of the Obama commercial is trying to get liberals more enthusiastic, because there always is the turnout problem. So, that it's hard to poll if you're polling people who are going to end up not showing up to vote on Sunday. That's, I think, especially after what happened here in November and in Britain last summer, what makes some people so nervous, and what made Obama, frankly, willing to record the commercial.
James Hohmann of the Washington Post. Thank you so much, James.
My pleasure. Thank you.